When I was working for the Oberoi Hotels, which was of course many eons ago, I had a meeting with the chairman and I had to go across to the Oberoi Farms, which is where his office was. And when you're meeting with the big boss, you wait and wait and wait. And while you wait, of course, you get hungry. And when you get hungry, what do? You head towards the kitchen. Luckily for me, I guess they liked me at that farm cum residence place. And so there was no problems in my going into the kitchen. It was a beautiful kitchen. I won't be able to describe it to you, but all I can say is that it had such an amazing ambience, and oh, the aromas were crazy. And the chef was making some minestrone soup. So I sat quietly on one of those wooden chairs and watched while he put together this minestrone soup, just 1 cup full for the big man. And I got some toast and I think some cheese to eat. But that was my first experience of minestrone soup, which was just the fragrance. I didn't taste it. But yes, I did come back home and try it immediately the next day and fell in love with it. So today I'm going to take you through the minestrone soup. Minestrone is one of those soups that can be had vegetarian as well as non-vegetarian. We are of course going non-vegetarian, hardcore. But the three main ingredients that minestrone really needs is some nice tomato broth, chicken based, a little bit of pasta and some beans. So what we're going to do today is we're going to make our own stock. For the basic stock, I have these chicken bones. There's a lot of meat as well on these bones, but you can ask your butcher for soup bones and he gives you stuff like this. Or if you're making a chicken, cooking a chicken and there's bones left over because you deboned it, you can use those bones as well. So I have about a kilo of chicken bones. I am adding 1 onion, and I'm going to bash or smash the garlic up a la Harry Potter. A few bay leaves, and I'm going to add some onion greens as well. These are all things that one tends to throw away. They make an amazing stock, broth, however you would like to have it. And I'm going to put my carrot peels in there as well. Make sure you wash and clean the carrots well before you do this, because you don't want grit in your stock. Carrots lend an amazing fragrance to any meat dish. My mother used to add carrots, grated carrots, even in her biryani. So what I'm doing with these peels is, instead of wasting them, and since we're using carrots in the minestrone soup, instead of wasting these peels, I'm adding it to my stock pot. In the old days, before the convenient soup cubes and stock powder came about, people used to make their own basic chicken stock, beef stock, mutton stock at home. So the best way they would do this was put all the bones in, all the waste material basically, the bones, vegetable peels, all sorts of stuff like that, and this pot full of water and all these yummy things put in with a little bit of herbs and onion and stuff would just keep bubbling away the whole day, and by the end of like 6-8 hours you would have stock ready. So that is what I'm trying to do here. I'm of course not going to be boiling this for 6-8 hours. I'm going to pressure cook it and then release the pressure and double boil it so that I get as much value as I can out of those bones. I will be using celery in the minestrone soup as well, but I'm also adding a little celery in my stock because later on when I use the stock, I want to have that celery fragrance in it. I'm just going to be adding about a teaspoon of salt. I don't want it too salty because then that leaves me the freedom to use salt however I want to in the dish that I'm cooking with it later on. And of course, about 1.5 liters of water. Now this is going to go on the fire. And meanwhile, we shall do some chopping, cutting, get ready for the minestrone. Chicken stock, if you're making it, I would suggest make a good quantity. You can freeze it, you can keep it in your refrigerator, and it comes in very handy whenever you want to add flavor to, say, a pulao or a chicken dish, or even, soups, of course, all sorts of soups, whether it's potato soup or a plain old tomato soup or just a cabbage soup or something. You just add a cup of your chicken stock and you see how the taste changes completely. I also use stock for a lot of Indian cooking, and it is a saving grace. While the stock is cooking, the other thing I'm going to be putting on the fire are these lovely tomatoes. I want to sort of create like a tomato-y broth, a thickish tomato-y broth. So once this softens, I will puree it and strain it so that there are no seeds, and we shall have the base for our minestrone, the second base for our minestrone, ready to use. I'm going to add a pinch of salt to this so that the tomato sweats nicely, and I'm also going to add a dash of water. Minestrone is actually one of the simplest soups to cook, but what I'm doing is I'm showing it to you from scratch so that then you can decide your shortcuts. For instance, you can use a can of baked beans instead of, soaking and boiling rajma. You can use a canned tomato, or you can use tomato paste, or you can use ready-made tomato puree. That doesn't taste so nice. You can use the ready-made chicken stock cubes or the ready-made chicken broth, and just sort of put it all together, and your minestrone is ready. But I am going a little more detailed, and I'm going from scratch so that you know exactly the kind of flavors that we'll be exploring today. So while the stocks are boiling and bubbling, let me introduce you to the vegetables that we're putting into it. Of course, there is zucchini. Zucchini is what my Vinay calls it, my veggie man. Some beans, some carrots, celery, of course, not so much, I'll just be using a little bit of it, and cabbage. So these are the vegetables I'm putting into it. What else is going into it is some pre-boiled rajma. So actually, whenever I cook rajma, I make sure I do a whole lot so that I can actually freeze off portions to make a minestrone or to make a chili con carne, and of course rajma chawal. What's also going into it is some leftover fettuccine from some amazing pasta that Amit had made. Minestrone requires a little bit of pasta in the soup. You can use any kind of pasta that you like. Spaghetti goes well, those little shell kind of things, I don't remember what they're called, that goes well. I'm using fettuccine because that's what I had left over. You can even use rice. As I'm sure you've guessed and have probably experienced, minestrone is more like a one-pot meal. It's a heavy, rich soup, which is why the pasta sort of completes it as a meal. You can have it by itself. You can have a little nice fresh bread on the side to dunk in. If you're into garlic, you can make some garlic bread for yourself. And I've given Amit some ideas. Now I'm not going to make garlic bread today. Okay, so let's get on with the chopping cutting. My mise plat is ready, so we can actually start making the soup now. The stock is still bubbling and I'm going to let it continue bubbling for a longer time, though I will use some of the stock in the soup. So I've got some chopped onions, I've got some garlic, I've got beans, I've got celery, carrots, the fettuccine, the rajma. You can use any other beans if you like. There's some nice zucchini, cabbage, there's red pepper flakes, pepper, thyme and oregano, and of course olive oil. The whole thing is cooked in olive oil. And we have tomato which I've blended already. I am cooking the soup in this beautiful pot which is called honeyware from Japan, and there is a whole story behind this pot which I shall save for later, or if you want to really hear the story, then write in and I shall tell you. As Jamie would say, a few glugs of olive oil. And remember to keep your pot on a slow fire. The other day I put some rice and I didn't put the fire on sim, and it just burned through and through and through because I was very busy playing Candy Crush. So moral of the story, don't play Candy Crush when your rice is on the fire or any food on the fire. So this olive oil, I'm going to add the onions and the celery and the carrots. This will cook for a few minutes till the onions go translucent, and that's when I'll add some garlic and the herbs. The onion has gone kind of translucent, and now what I'm going to be doing is add the garlic and the herbs. So in herbs I have thyme, about that much, and I have oregano, some pepper, and some chili flakes. Smelling so good. So good. Can you smell it? So that bubble sound you're hearing at the background is the stock getting done. There's a lot of meat on these bones as well. So once I actually picked off all the meat from the soup bones and made a very nice paella with it. The garlic has kind of cooked. So now I'm going to add the tomato. This will simmer and cook till the tomato sort of changes color, becomes a little darker, and that's when we'll add the rest of the stuff. The tomato has kind of cooked, and now I shall add some stock to it and let it simmer, and then once it's simmered nicely for around 10-15 minutes or so, then I shall add the rajma. Now I shall add all the green stuff. All these vegetables, the beans and the zucchini as well as the cabbage, they're all fast cooking vegetables, so you add them in last because you don't really want them, becoming too mushy and it tastes horrible. You want to leave them slightly crunchy, so you add them in last. And along with that, I'm going to be adding the rajma. So this has been cooking for around 15 minutes, and I'm now going to add the pasta. I'm not going to add all of it. The best thing about minestrone is that it keeps very well, so it actually tastes better, like all rajma dishes do, the next day. So whatever's left over, you can freeze it or you can have it for lunch. Parmesan. Hot, so I don't know how I'm going to be tasting it, but this is a perfect kind of thing for a rainy day night, a nice murder mystery on the television, and minestrone soup, or a good book. I didn't add more salt because the tomato had salt and the chicken stock has salt, so the salt is perfect. The parmesan sort of just hits that spot, and of course the tomato and the beans and the pasta, it's all total comfort food. Of course the huge difference is the homemade chicken stock. Nothing like good old homemade stuff. So have a good Sunday, and we'll see you again next week. Meanwhile, remember I asked you a question, so if you really want to know the answer to this secret story, let me know, and meanwhile, like, subscribe and comment.